It's for me, it was a great thrill to find someone that you'd known in one life, and then all of a sudden here they are, like really distinguished and extraordinary painter. And when I first saw his paintings, and you maybe you've seen that in that great poster, another in the great series of posters. We have the best posters, we really do. But you look, when I first saw pictures of Kon's work, I thought, this is like video work or something. And it's not. It's painting, and it's painting based on an understanding of kind of older technologies in a way that's really interesting. I mean, there's a lot of ideas at work here. Kon was born in Moscow. His parents emigrated to the United States in 1990 when he was just a kid, like 10-year-old kid, 11-year-old kid. And so he grew up here and just started painting and just been painting and painting. He's been in a lot of shows, been in shows at PS1. He showed at Gagosian Gallery for a while. It's been shown in a lot of different galleries around the world. And he's just someone who basically thinks that the way to become a painter is to paint. And you just keep painting. And every day you paint some more. And it's kind of refreshing to find someone who's a painter who has a lot of ideas in his work, but whose idea about how you paint is about getting into the studio, making another one, trying to figure something else out. So it's my great pleasure to introduce to you Kon Trubkovich.
Thank you, David. Hi, everyone. Thank you for that great introduction, David. So yeah, I'm gonna just jump into the presentation. I want to start. I've done this talk a couple of times, where I kind of start talking about how I came about this work, and I'm gonna make this first slide. So this is what looks like kind of an inconspicuous little watercolor. What I was doing right before I made this was trying to make this enormous, and I guess I was like, probably close to your age, guys. In my early 20s, I was trying to make this really enormous painting. And it was like a real quagmire. It was just not working, and I really wanted to make like the great, great, great painting that everyone wants to make. And really not happening. And at some point I just realized that I couldn't really continue down into this kind of rabbit hole of this painting. And one of the things I wanted to do was just to kind of invert that whole desire into making something super simple. That summer I'd taken a cross-country trip with a friend and brought this old V8 high-8 camera with me and filmed just a bunch of stuff. And so I remember kind of sitting around thinking about this painting in my studio, seeing kind of already with dread that it was going to be a disaster and never to recover. And I remember like getting up and pausing, watching the footage of this trip and pausing it, and suddenly seeing this whole narrative, strange narrative, open up. And I'd paused it on this bush. And it was like a kind of, one of those eureka moments, like, why don't I just make something small that I see on TV? And up until that moment, I really wanted to be like an Abex painter, like a real American kind of old school Abex painter. And when I did the pause, it kind of occurred to me, it was maybe like the first conceptual thing I'd ever really thought of as an artist, that the pause itself was like an Abex gesture. Kind of in its randomness and its kind of inability to be repeated in its kind of temporality. It was like an Abex gesture. And so I made this little 6x6 watercolor that day. And that's all my work sort of had changed course just because of this. And I'm going to dwell on this one for just a second, just to make sure that like I get that point across, that this was a little tiny watercolor that was like the kind of pivot of the work, and to be able to simplify things and to make things clear for myself was like a big kind of venture into the unknown. Anyway, moving on. From that same video, we ended up with my friend at the Little Bighorn, which is where the historic battle of Little Bighorn happened. Um, it's called Custer's Last Stand, but that's, Native Americans call it Little Bighorn. And I remember walking through that cemetery. It's now a military cemetery, and just filming it because we were there. There was no real kind of intention there. We're just filming me and my friend just filming this really quite serene, beautiful place. But when I came back, and with this idea in mind, going through the video and starting to pause all these images, I happened upon these videos of the cemetery. And when I started pausing those images, something else happened entirely. And this is kind of starts to open up this process of using the pause as this kind of narrative device of moving, of like thinking of things in terms of temporality and memory, and kind of layering those memories through the video pause. These were the first pieces where I actually began to sort of unfold this ability to do that with this pause images in my head. And it became, so with each kind of layer of working this strange technology, this kind of analog technology, I was discovering like a way to tell a hidden narrative in images. What artists call the picture plane. This is a picture of my first show with this work, and my first show in New York, actually. It was at PS1 in 2006. With the images of the cemetery, the Little Bighorn works, I also showed a video. And actually, for the first 5-6 years of my career, I mostly worked in video, actually, and painting was a kind of scaffolding for the videos, and that inverted at some point, and painting became the dominant thing for me. But at first, video was actually the dominant medium for me. This is a still from the video. The video, and I don't know, some of you guys will remember, this was the Bush era war in Iraq, and the orange jumpsuit was like this ubiquitous sign of the times, Abu Ghraib and all this stuff had happened. And so I used this idea of the escaped convict as a kind of metaphor for the artistic process, because I was, also kind of feeling out the idea of what is freedom, what is artistic freedom, what is creative freedom, and how to articulate that as a young person, as a young artist. And so I made this video of two men in orange jumpsuits running in this figure 8 formation through the forest. It's called Repeat Offenders. My first video I ever made, and still kind of remains one of the more important works I've made. From that video, I also, and this is something that I kind of keep coming back to, I made a series of watercolors from the video stills, and these are the watercolors. And at first, one of the challenges that was really, for me, was to render the video still, the television screen, in the most kind of honest way possible. And this is even before I tried to do it with oil paint on canvas. It was really just with watercolor. But just to get that jitteriness of the image, and this idea starts to emerge for me of that I'm actually not painting space in a conventional way, like the pictorial space that normally you'd see in a painting, or a drawing of some still life. What I'm really painting is a flat surface that represents a kind of space. So there's a sort of paradox in the work that I found also super interesting. This is the second video I made, and it's in 2 parts. This one is called Ant Farm. By this time I was sort of, trying to like spread my wings a little bit. I got this gallery to support me, and I decided to make a video in a prison. I was reading Foucault a bit, which I think kind of drove me a little nuts, and this idea of the panopticon and this kind of way our society is constructed. And again, coming back to this idea of the kind of mindless labor, and the artist is a kind of prisoner of his own thought. I mean, I looked for a prison to make this video, and we found this prison in Pennsylvania. And in the lunchroom of the prison, the prisoners, it was an abandoned prison, but the prisoners at some point, maybe in the 60s, had painted a bunch of murals. You can see here it's John Lennon, James Brown. There was also Roberto Clemente, Marcus Garvey, and a couple other people, historical figures. And just the absurdity of having this in a prison, these kind of really inspirational, sort of freedom-loving kind of individuals in the prison, and the kind of strangeness of it all was, I realized that this was going to be the setting for the video, where these group of convicts are carrying just useless junk back and forth in front of this kind of strange painting made by prisoners. So the next one, I'm just gonna warn you, this it's gonna be some nudity in the next photo. This is this is the second part of this video, and this one is called No Exit. Sorry, I got the title wrong here. This was based, and these were both shot in the same day, and this was the second part of this video, and this was called No Exit, and it's was based on a photo I saw of the aftermath of the Attica uprising. It's not to get into the long story. There was an uprising in a prison that was put down super violently by the New York governor in the 60s, I believe. And the prisoners, once the riot was subdued, the prisoners were made to undress and march around the yard in this humiliating way. And in the same way, that photo also reminded me of like a Poussin painting, like a kind of neo-Baroque, classical kind of nude courtyard, in Rome, this Poussin kind of theme. And so this is kind of how I constructed this video. And yeah, like we cast all of these people, and was one of the strangest casting experiences I've ever had. From the same series, this is a painting called Smokestack. I seem to have gotten all of the titles wrong here. Again, this is a little bit of an abstracted form, but it's actually just a smokestack from the prison. And the video, again, like I think that this is all of this kind of repeated theme of the video that's doing something to the image that is very unexpected, which is it kind of gives it a sense of a memory. And this is something that I that come back to over and over again in my work, that the video pose became in essence a metaphor for memory, or for the act of remembering and forgetting. And the act of painting became kind of just a way to relive that. It's very video heavy early on in this presentation, but it'll get more and more painting. This is the fourth video that I made. It was called Double Entrance, Double Exit, and it was filmed at Michael Heiser's Double Negative, which is a earthwork, famous earthwork by the artist Michael Heiser in Nevada. And what he did was created two trenches on the opposite side of a mesa, that the sculpture itself is the negative space that he extracted from the landscape. And I got very interested at that moment in this piece, because I was also really interested in Gothic architecture, like cathedrals, and it seemed to me that this actually mirrored the architecture of a cathedral, where you have the nave and you have the altar and the crossing, and it all kind of has the same structure as this sculpture, which I don't know, maybe Heiser even thought of that too. But so I filmed myself traversing through it, and then I made a soundtrack or I appropriated the music from Andrei Rublev, the Tarkovsky movie, as a soundtrack by Vyacheslav Ovechnikov. These are more stills from that show. So again, kind of like this pattern emerges where I was doing these videos, and then I would make the stills from the videos as a kind of companion pieces to the videos. But that's actually begins to shift very soon, because the painting starts to kind of take over my practice, and it's sort of, the videos become sort of less present in my work. And I think actually, I just queued it up. That's kind of when this happens. So this is also from the double entrance, double exit video. These are two self-portraits, but I started, because I was in the video, I decided to make these self-portraits. And somehow through making these self-portraits, I started to really get obsessed with the idea of how to paint this flatness and pictorial space, and kind of deal with the kind of internal structure of painting and the space that it demands through the television screen. And these are the first paintings that I really did of the video screen, and that I think kind of started this whole painting kind of obsession for me. At the same time, I was thinking, because I think one of the things that is really, I think, important as an artist is to kind of question your own intentions all the time, and how, like, what is it that you're trying to do in the studio, and to press into kind of uncomfortable areas that because it's quite easy to, I think, to get into a flow where you kind of forget how to be experimental and how to be adventurous in the studio, because if things can be easy at times or very difficult at times, and you get stuck in the same sort of cycle with the works. And so what I was trying to do, because I'd made those paintings of the self-portraits that I just showed, was actually reverse engineer it and make an abstract painting. And so I thought one of the ways to do it was just to paint television static. And this is the first painting I made. And actually, what began to happen with these paintings is they started, when I took the subject out of them and began to deal specifically with just this abstract kind of noise, the idea of communication and the idea of a breakdown of communication and the idea of kind of stillness in the signal, or the lack of signal, became really apparent in this work. And I then you start thinking about paintings then in terms of ways of communicating, a kind of hidden language, a wordless language. And sometimes the language is so difficult to articulate through a painting that the signal breaks down. And so this may be what these paintings were about, in a quite literal sense, because they are no signal. Another version of that. This one says "Mama," and this will segue into the next body of work. So this is, I want to kind of end cap here, because the next body of work is a big kind of transition for me. I made this painting of the word "mama" because I thought, I don't know, it just seemed like the most basic thing to write, like maybe the most common first words people say, and they're in the most kind of human way, the most reduction of our connectivity to each other, to nature, to the mother figure, the fertility goddess, all of those things kind of in one painting. And again, the breakdown, the connection of that is in the static. And so I made this painting, and this sort of, I didn't know how else to continue making these paintings. I felt like this was the final one. And so I went back to what I'd often do when I run out of ideas, which is go back to watching the videos, watching old videos, like I did that day, like with the bush and with the cross country trip. I started watching actually old family videos of our life in Moscow, and I happened on this video, which was the final party that my parents threw before we left to the United States. It was like 3 or 4 days before we immigrated, and all their friends were over, and it was a big, joyous, kind of bittersweet, sardonic, also because celebration. And there's a moment in it where my mother kind of looks up, and something somebody says something to her, but I paused that moment of her looking up, and there's this kind of mid motion thing where she just looked exactly like, almost like a Rembrandt chiaroscuro kind of painting right on the TV screen. And I thought, wow, well, this is an amazing moment. And then I thought, this is just 1 second. What if I painted this whole second, frame by frame? And then I thought further, like, this is all kind of what's happening all at the same time. I thought, what was happening at that same moment? What if there was multiple pivots happening? We're leaving. And then what was the other pivot that could have happened from the other sort of collective perspective? And I thought, maybe it's Reagan's Brandenburg Gate speech. What if those two things happen all at once? And then I thought, why don't I paint pick it, like, have this, imagine, this is not real, but imagine that these 2 seconds happen simultaneously, and I will paint these 2 seconds frame by frame, and that will be my project for the next foreseeable future. And that's what I did for the next 5 years. And these are the paintings. So I made 24 paintings of my mother and 24 paintings of Reagan giving this Brandenburg Gate speech. And in a sense, they are kind of self-portraits, in a sense, because they are the manifestation or the articulation of the male and the female ego in all of us. The sort of individualist ego and the collective ego, the connectedness and the isolation or alienation in all of us, or the desire for those things. And they're, the sort of yin and yang of our internal sort of ID that as humans. And so these works ended up being extremely important to me, and they took forever, and I painted them. At some point I kind of regretted even setting on this journey, because it was like I had to finish it. And that's you set out these parameters to yourself, and you tell everyone you're doing it, and then you have to paint 48 paintings, and it becomes a burden. And then in that burden you also find some kind of artistic journey integrity. I don't know. So a lot of artists talk about, like, creating these sort of obstacles and boundaries for themselves in the studio, and in that way they find the kind of minutia within those limitations. Like Ed Reinhardt talked about that all the time, I think. So these are some of the other paintings from that series. Sorry, am I going too fast? They're all 60 by 72. They're big. I always, it took me, thank you for that question, actually, because I felt always much more comfortable making big paintings. It took me much longer to figure out how to make smaller works. It's very hard for me at first. Here's another installation shot from 2014 from my show in Marion Boski. And so this is a video I made, and this is actually the last video I've shown. It's been 10 years since I actually made a video, and I think for me, painting, I have ideas for paintings all the time, and I think you know, just draw in your sketchbook and so things happen and all of a sudden you want to make something and it just kind of comes quick to me, at least for me. Videos is like the opposite. I have like one good idea every 10 years, I think, if so. This was one of them. So this is again going back to this process of rewatching old films. I remembered at the time I was really looking, trying to figure out what my next video project was, and I remembered there was a family friend. She was always at all the gatherings, um, and she was always pretty inebriated. These Russian gatherings, and she always had a video camera with her because I think she was trying to remember what was going on the next day. But she was always filming, and this is in the 90s and the 80s. You know, so she had a lot of old videos. And so I went to her and I said, "Listen, can you give me all those videos? I will digitize them all for you, so you'll have your archive, and I get all the tapes." She said, "Sure." So now I'm still in possession of this like enormous trove of these home videos. It's like all of our family and friends and immigration and you know assimilation and all of this whole very strange story of coming to this country. And so I started watching them and started to piece together this video called Snow out of them. Once the videos start to emerge, this kind of story of this kind of dream sequence, this strange kind of east-west dynamic in the video, where like there's these old videos of Moscow, and then there she is going to like Disneyland, and so there was this kind of weaving through the video was this kind of east-west dichotomy. And what I did with this video is that I transferred it to 35 millimeter stock once I edited, and then I drew and painted and scratched and just started messing with the film. And so this is the video where the painting and the mark making and the film and the video screen kind of all converged for me. And I still haven't made a video since, so I think I'm kind of overdue now. This is a painting called Snow, a series of paintings I made about snow, kind of thinking about this video that I just talked about and making paintings of essentially abstract mark making, but then again, like making a bunch of drawing marks, random marks, and then bringing them back into the television space and repainting them through the television space. And this is the first time I did that, and this kind of starts to reappear in my work, where I'm just trying to pull as many things as I can into my orbit, into my studio, and then just throw them on the TV and see what happens, and throw them into the screen and experiment as much as I can and expand the field, because actually making 48 paintings of Reagan and my mother nearly drove me crazy. And after that, I just wanted to do like anything else and expand, because expand as much as I can. As things working, things not working didn't matter as much. All right, I'm gonna do a big little time jump 5 years later, because there was all sorts of things, experiments and going on for the next 5 years, different shows, different things. But I think this is just an important kind of moment where I don't know if you guys familiar with this thing. It's called it was a kind of a meme on the internet called accidental renaissance. All right, good. It was a whole Reddit page, and there was this like kind of amazing people were finding photos all over the place, from the public domain, from Tumblr, from people's Instagrams, and the photos would look like Baroque paintings, like amazing kind of stuff. And one of them was this series of photos from the Ukrainian parliament of this really nasty fight in 2015 between Russian separatists and Ukrainian parliamentarians. It's like before the war. This is before the invasion of Crimea. This is, or no, it was right after the invasion of Crimea. And I remember looking at those images, and okay, there was a number of things that attracted me to the image. Like the first thing, obviously, is that I had recognized like the politics of it, and it was really close to home. and I understood the politics of it. But then there was something else. There was something kind of aesthetic and deeper than aesthetic, like a childhood memory that kept creeping in for me. And I remembered, oh, I remember being really little, and there was a Rembrandt book in my house, and it was like one of the first art books I'd ever seen. I was very little, and I remember turning the page to this painting called "The Blinding of Samson," and there was, show it to you. It's right here. And I remember seeing this painting in a reproduction and being like, I can't believe I get to see this. Like, it was like, felt like a forbidden thing that I got to see, like, amazing, like the violence and then this just foreshortening and just seeing this kind of intensity. I was like, I can't believe I'm allowed to see this. And that stuck with me for forever. And Rembrandt's still probably top 3 favorite artists of mine. And but then that's why I really gravitated towards these photos of this Ukrainian fight. And so I thought, I want to make a painting of this Ukrainian accidental Renaissance meme at the scale that would be like a real Baroque painting. Like you would see like a Delacroix or a Rembrandt. And that's what I did. I think this painting that we just saw was like 100 inches across. This one is 108 inches across. And so I started making a whole series of works that were based on those photographs from the Ukrainian fight, and messing with them, pulling them apart and pushing them into some other space, but still keeping the idea that they are Baroque paintings, that they are kind of in the same kind of tradition and in the same space as like the history painting that Rembrandt would do. Another one from the same series, and I called them because the whole series is called Golden Ratio because it's another joke actually from what was that movie about the demons and the book, that Dan Brown book about Louvre and yeah, Da Vinci Code. So the Fibonacci curve in that is like a big thing, right? It looks like this mystery of the composition that unites all aesthetics through through eternity. It's maybe it's true, I don't know, but it's a kind of a funny joke about painting as well. So I called them Golden Ratio. And actually, if you put that Golden Ratio little graphic on there, it kind of works. In the same time, I was going through photos of that same period, kind of that I left Russia. That same dissolute. I'll back up a little bit. I left Russia in 1990 with my parents, so it was still the Soviet Union. And then the following year, there was an attempted coup. The whole thing fell apart, and Soviet Union dissolved into a bunch of little pieces, and history happened. And one of the things that I remember seeing when I was little, 11 years old, like when I first came here, was watching the news on the television of tanks rolling down my street in Moscow, but I was here in Philadelphia actually. And the surreal nature of that, I think, stuck with me in a way. Maybe why I do so much work with the television screen is just this idea of having to watch, of this idea of being that distance of seeing your home and seeing all of this stuff happen through the TV screen was like a temporal thing that I experienced that I think made me want to make these paintings from the television screen as some kind of maybe reliving of strange childhood, that trauma of seeing of losing connection and being that displacement, that like kind of irreversible displacement, where where you know you can't go back to a place because it no longer exists. And so one of the images that I saw from this period was this image of citizens just walking through this boulevard with all of this just stuff that clearly had something had happened. There's, had been fighting or had been some kind of violence, and but yet these people are they seem to be going to work or seem to be going somewhere. It's unclear where they're going, but they're not running it. They're just kind of walking through in this kind of banal, strange, casual way. And I thought that this is how the world actually is. Things happen, and we adjust, and we just kind of walk through it. And then I made that painting in 2020, and then all of this stuff happened in America as well that year, with all the protests and George Floyd and all of the things that I thought, I'd just seen on the television when I was younger. I was seeing on the television here. And so I don't know what to say about that so as much as except for the fact that it was the work kind of, at first it was about me, and it was about my own kind of experience as a person displaced in some sense. But it really became more about the fragility of things and fragility of our societies in general, because it's very clear now that this is not unique to any place. Another painting from that series called Barricade. And again, what's interesting to me about this painting is that there's just these two people in like a magenta jacket seeing this thing happen as if they're looking at the store window. And I just thought that was quite an amazing image that I repainted or remade, refilmed. I don't know. There's so many layers to how I work. You start with an image, and then you feed it through, record it onto a video cassette, then you photograph the television screen, and then you piece these images from the television screen into and weave them into a composition, and then maybe it's okay, and maybe it's not, and maybe you start a painting and it doesn't work out, and maybe it's great. So to get to this point, there's all of these different stages that I go through to get there. This is actually not so different from the other paintings, even though it looks super radically different aesthetically. This image is based on an image that's a tribute to Lyubov Popova, who was a Russian constructivist painter. But the interesting thing about the original image was that they actually don't know whether it was her or not, for the reason because it was when these paintings were confiscated by the Bolsheviks, they were deprived of their provenance because they were deemed anti-revolutionary, and so people don't actually know what the history of these paintings. They were all kind of re-emerged after the Soviet Union dissolved, without a history, without an identity, with a kind of and very much like the people of the country became kind of orphans in some of history, in a sense. And so I wanted to make this painting based on this image that's quasi attributed to Lyubov, with the point being that it's actually very similar to all of us from that era. This is a self-portrait called Threshold from a similar time. Okay, a new body of work. So after my show in New York with the paintings I just described to you, a few months after that, the Ukraine war started, and for me it was like one of the most shocking things I'd like ever experienced, because I never, I think for a lot of people, you seem to hold on to this idea that we don't live in a war, in a world where people just start to kill each other for no reason. But that's what happened, and it was from a country that I was born in, and there was a kind of moral crisis for me, and so didn't really know how to paint. I didn't really go into the studio, or I would go into the studio and kind of sit around and look at the news for days. And then one day I was looking at these Malevich paintings. And all over the news, this was right in the beginning of the war, there was so much footage of refugees just flooding out of the country on trains, just over rivers, carrying belongings. And we're all starting to get used to these images. They were kind of shocking in 22. And I remember seeing these Malevich paintings of these peasants. They were like really late paintings for him. And you guys are not familiar with Malevich. He's a Russian constructivist who did the Black Square, and really kind of a pioneer in abstraction. But late in his life, after he'd been already deemed undesirable by the communists and was basically in quasi exile, he made these paintings of Ukrainian peasants from his memory that he had as a child, because he was of Polish descent, but lived in Ukraine in his whole childhood. And people think he's a Russian artist, but actually he's not, or not in a technical sense. And they reminded me of actually the images I was seeing on TV of these of the refugees. And so I started kind of repurposing, re-engineering these Malevich paintings to what I was seeing on TV. And so this is one that was called Evacuation. Another one called Cartographer. Oh, sorry. All right. After that, so yeah, that was really quite a difficult period, I think, because I had, everything kind of turned upside down. I had shows canceled. Everything was really became very difficult and very fraught. And I was just basically in the studio trying to figure things out. And I realized I didn't really want to make paintings from the public domain anymore. I just wanted to have to be able to draw and to sit around, to think of things and then just make them. But it actually was a way more difficult problem than I anticipated, because I needed video, and I needed footage, and I needed to have a kind of a sense of real space in order for it to look real, and for it to look like a video still. And so I started messing around with this program called Unreal Engine with a group of designers, and we basically we started laying out compositions with people in them that resembled some of those earlier paintings I showed you, like Barricade and the Antepenultimate End, with the people in the street. And we created a whole series of these compositions that were made on the computer and fed through the video decks, and then created as these paintings. But what's unique about them is that they aren't real. They're not based in reality. They were computer generated from drawings, from sketches. And so in some sense, they were really much more closer to, the way Renaissance artists worked, where you'd create a bunch of drawings, you'd create a bunch of compositions, and then you would piece them together into a larger composition and bring it all together in a kind of larger work. So this is the first painting I did this way, called Divider. And so, yeah, these are not real people. This is not a real place. This was all kind of conceived and made in the computer, and then from drawings and in the computer, and then in this kind of unreal reality of this program. Another one from that series. Another one. Yeah, like some of these people are like NPCs essentially. Okay, this is the last of it. I'm fine. I'm getting to the end of the presentation. This is the last show I just had, actually, just in September. I continued to try to figure out how to work with this computer software and how to expand what I was doing. The one of the limitations that in that first round of paintings was that the people were very kind of almost like architectural um, stand-ins, because it was just too much work to make them personalize all of them because they were so small. But so I wanted to see if we can make a much kind of get deeper into the character of each subject in the paintings. And so I started making these like just figurative sketches, and you see one here. And then I made a bunch, and then we recreated them using the same program, but now we went into the detail of each face and the hair, the everything, the composition, and recreated the drawings in this really kind of painstaking way. And then I created these paintings from these renders of those builds and those computer generated people. So again, these are not real people. This is just all kind of conceived through sketching and through and in some sense this is like a much more I don't know, historical way of painting, maybe. Another one, this is computer generated person, and then repainted, made into I was really interested in Fra Angelico this past year, and Filippo Lippi and all of these kind of early Italian Renaissance guys. And so this is a painting that kind of references that. Another painting made with the computer called Satellite. They're not made with the computer. I paint them. They're painted. It's just that the image itself is not from a photo, but from a computer generated kind of avatar. And then I think this is the last slide for me. And these are 3 portraits again from that same series. And these are based actually on Ophelia, the Shakespeare character. And that was my last show, was called Ophelia. So I think that's it. Yeah.
Like as technology advances. Oh, do you see as technology advances, like yourself experimenting with AI at all and generating these people?
So we used a little bit of AI in these images actually, but not to generate anything new. I find right now with AI that to generate something new is very difficult. It just has this kind of watermark of AI on it that I find kind of repetitive. But we used AI to enhance them. Hair, eyes, skin, all of these things. It just gave it some kind of a little bit of enhancement. But it's anyone's guess where this is. And yes, of course. I mean, I just got asked a couple of months ago, and I've been messing around with Sora to be like a beta tester with Sora, which is the new video software. And I'm gonna tell you, it's cool. You can just type stuff in and they make videos. They all kind of, even if they don't look the same, they all kind of have the same weird, like, it's not there yet to make art and some like it will be, I'm sure, but for now it doesn't have that ability to do something with that is sui generis, that you've never seen before, because it's just simply based in this kind of data set it's limited by its data set. They can't imagine anything new. What do you mean? I'm not a computer guy. I can barely like send an email. So I had I had a group of designers that I worked with who knew the program, and we would sit. And the first group of works we did completely over the internet together, just through video, because it was still COVID, which was fascinating actually. But yeah, there was a group of, I would send them drawings, And then it was very much like almost like a workshop of like a Rubens or somebody, where they would get me back, and then I would draw over that, like change a hand, change the face, change this, and then they would. So it was this back and forth with a group of computer designers. It's even more than sculpture. It's like theater. It's almost like theater staging, where you're like staging sculptures on a stage, which is fascinating. Yeah, I mean, this definitely opened up a whole space of thought for me that wasn't there before.
I have a question in terms of your process. There's a lot of linear demarcations that appear as glitches, but they're hand painted. Could you talk about your painting process, whether you use a ruler or how you get the linear dimension?
No
Involved.
rulers. No
What?
rulers.
No ruler.
No. Or tape. I don't like either one of those things.
So how do you get the lines so straight?
So I used to just pencil them in back in the day. Then after a while, I realized that each one of those paintings was taking me like 4.5 months, and that's not in itself a huge problem. What for me became the problem is that I was a little bit too precious with the underpainting because it took so long. So then I started printing this very faint image underneath of the lines, and that's how I am able to have a guide underneath. Yeah.
Why do you Why do you paint? It seems like most of the imagery you're using as a guide has exist the with the sort of like um glitches already.
I don't understand.
Why do you then paint?
They don't exist. I made them. They never. I mean, these. It's not that these images ever existed. I pay. I mean, there's two questions there. One is that what if these images didn't exist before? So I don't know what that means. But the larger question, why do I paint, is that I think it's just like speaking. Like I don't have another language. I'm not like it's the only thing that I do that feels that I'm connected to um this world that I live in. It's how I feel connected. Without it I feel adrift, and so that's why I do it.
Any general tips for painting on such large scales?
Yeah. Don't don't micromanage it. Like don't get all precious about little things. Go big. I don't know. It's kind of weird to say because I paint like little details, but actually, like one of the things about painting large is that you got to see the whole thing all the time, and to like to start to like certain little areas and kind of be at the mercy of that can really undo a big painting, because it's that's the kind of things that you have to see the whole space. And another thing is just I would say, just in terms of what I discovered, and this goes for small paintings too, but it's really true for big paintings, is that you have to see the work past the corners. Like, don't let the corners trap the painting, and to imagine the painting spreading out past the corners, like how it deals with space. I think Frank Stella wrote this amazing book called Working Space. If you want to read it, I think it would be super helpful.
I have the mic. Oh, can you hear? Does it
I
work?
can hear.
Okay.
Just don't see. Oh, there you are. Yeah.
Okay. I was wondering how you critically engage with your own work, like looking retrospectively at your presentation and at certain moments from it, from painting the Ukrainian politicians to this kind of like sentimental, nostalgic view of for the fall of the USSR. And I mean, also that being a moment that, of course, the fall of the USSR, and you were a child and you had a nostalgic view over it, but that means the liberation of bunch of countries and people and so on. And I don't know, I'm from Romania, for example. It's probably the single most important moment in recent Romanian history. And then also the paintings with the refugees from Ukraine and so on. I was wondering how you look at that work now. And then also it feels like now you kind of stepped away from politically charged image, and whether that you did it with the intention of how you approached it before in the past.
So that's true. With this last show specifically, it'd been so grim for so long that I just wanted to make a show of in some sense a kind of something about beauty or something about poetry, and still somehow they just seem super dark to me anyhow. And that's just my nature. I think what you're saying, I mean, I don't know, I don't have one thing I paint. So the one thing that I do always seem to gravitate towards is a kind of personal connection to the subject matter, because that gives me just enough kind of connective tissue to the subject that I can then paint. You know what I mean? Because otherwise, there's a sort of sense of inauthenticity to the subject matter. And then if I know that there is a kind of authentic personal connection to the subject matter, I don't have to think about it and I can just paint. That's why I painted my mom, because it was just easy to do that in some sense and just think about the painting from that point on, and just think about the forms and think about the color and think about the surface and all of those things, because I knew on some level that there was going to be kind of a kind of honesty to it that there from the start.
But what kind of honesty are you looking out for in the paintings that are referencing the USSR and
Just
Russia and so on? It's just
well,
your
it's-
personal connection?
Yeah.
Because you're handling images that are politically charged outside of your experience also.
Yeah, I mean, I have my own politics, but I try to. It's not so much. Certainly, with the Ukraine paintings, I had a very like I even in the press release for that show, I made a statement about the war, and I was, those are very political paintings. But the other paintings aren't so much political as they are kind of observations of my own nebulous kind of existence in this whole thing, in this whole kind of flow of history.
So kind of just jumping off Luana, you're talking about, how sometimes your work is political, other times it's observations, and how you need to have a personal connection to them. I'm wondering how like the Trump inauguration and our current political climate is inspiring, or, if that's something you're gonna
To be honest,
explore in your work.
actually, I haven't been able to paint. To be honest with you, this has been pretty messed up, and I think it's okay to really gather your thoughts right now, and to maybe some people are painting like crazy, but right now it seems for me it was it's not so much a shock as much as a kind of existential dread that I'm feeling that is hard to paint through, because I think we're living in the very real situation that's happening as we speak. So I don't know, like here I have very little guidance for you guys. This is pretty difficult times, but I do think that eventually that the only record of this will be the artwork that's made. So at some point that does become very important. But yeah, like I'm struggling with that right now. I'm afraid of a more complicated issue. I've been making a painting in the studio for the last 5 years that nobody wants to see because it's bearing witness. That's actually what's happening. That there's a kind of collective blindness right now to the real subjects at hand. People just want to see paintings of cats or something. and I understand. I mean, it's natural also to have a kind of escapist tendency, but yeah, that's I think eventually maybe I hope to show this painting about all of this, you know.
I was just curious about this like switch you made from like like man-made images to like computer generated images, like things that like you started with very personal and uh like just personal subjects to you. Was there like a disconnection when you started like painting computer generated
Well, it's
stuff?
interesting. Actually, it's kind of inverted because these are actually more personal because they come from my drawings. The other images were kind of from the public domain or other people's videos. So these are actually the most personal works in some sense because they're really based on my drawings. They're based on my sketchbooks. They're based on the things that and the reason I started making those was specifically because I felt a little bit trapped by other people's images and having to look for things rather than just drawing and making them exactly how I want them.
Maybe we have time for just this one more question.
Kind of jumping off of that point, is that like part of the reason why you stopped making so many video works and started shifting more towards painting? Was there like a disconnect in the medium of video that you found, like that painting you resonated more with?
So I wish sort of that was true, but I think I got just super nerdy about painting. I like really got into it in a way that even I didn't expect. At some point, the problem of painting becomes so intoxicating that it's really hard to walk away from it. Yeah.